Hey, I'm C. Hope Clark. This session is Habits of a Successful Writer. Getting started as a writer sounds easy, and it's fun when you get going. It's a lot of passion that you're pouring into a story, and that's how we all get started as writers. But to be a successful writer, to take that story and turn it into something that is marketable, is a little bit steeper hill to climb. So I want to go over some of that with you as to how to develop the habits that successful writers have so that you can ponder whether to take your writing from the hobby level to the career or professional level. The first thing that I hate to say preach, but it's turned into a little bit of a rant, is that you need to show up to work. The successful writer actually shows up at the computer or at their pen and paper every single day. Stephen King is one of the best examples I can use. To this day, he writes 10 pages a day. Now that means, let's just say 250 words a page, 2,500 words a day. That is volumes of writing. That is just tons of writing. And it doesn't matter if it's a holiday, if he has family over, if he's on the road, regardless, he makes a point of setting up time every day to write 10 pages. I think that's phenomenal. Not that you have to maintain that level of production, but there's nothing wrong with, say, 500 words a day. That's 2 pages. 2 pages. Hemingway spent 8 hours a day writing 500 words. That sounds ridiculous, but when you read his work, you understand why. He was meticulous and he wanted every word to count. And keep in mind, he didn't have a computer. So you need to be motivated when you get started. And I think that's not a problem for most of us. We have a story in our mind. We're motivated to want to get it down. We want other people to read it. That's great. That's how you get the ball started. But you've got to turn that motivation into a habit, because somewhere between that excitement of motivation and a month down the road, that enthusiasm is going to lag. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Your motivation needs to turn into a habit. Henry David Thoreau has a comment that I love. It says, "It is not that we are busy, so are ants. It's what we are busy about." So that's what I've got to get into your mind, is that you're motivated about your story. It's not the hours you put into it, it's the quality that you put into it. It's the direction that you're going. Enthusiasm is the electricity of life. How do you get it? You act enthusiastic until you make it a habit. And that is difficult to do. But if you turn your motivation and your passion into a habit, it gets to the point that every time you sit down at a computer, it feels fun. So that's what I'm trying to get you to, and that doesn't happen overnight. So how do you develop a writing ritual? A habit is made up of 3 things: the cue, the routine, and the reward. Okay, the cue can be anything. It might be just sitting down at the computer. It might be going to get your cup of coffee to take to the computer. It might be grabbing your gummy bears to go to the computer. Whatever it happens to be, you have this cue that tells your mind it's time to sit down and write. I grab an iced tea and go sit at my computer. And it can be any, I used to think I could only write at a certain time of day. I've learned if I do my little cue, regardless, when I go sit down at my computer, my head says it's time to write. So it could be simple. It could be the time of day. It could be turning on music. Some writers write to music. It could be just closing your door that tells the whole world, and sort of you subconsciously, that it's time to get busy. Truman Capote, I thought this was interesting. He wrote reclined on a sofa or a bed with his cigarette and coffee. That's how he started the day. Okay, laying down, I don't know how he did that. Then as he progressed throughout the day writing, he switched his drink to tea. Then it turned to sherry, Then it turned to martinis. Of course, we all know he loved his liquor. But he did his first and second drafts in pencil and his third on a typewriter. See, he had all of these little rituals that he did. Obviously, I think probably his best writing happened when he was on his coffee and tea, but we shall never know. But he had his ritual, and that's what he did day after day after day, and that's how he could write. I'm not sure you need to be as eccentric as that, but find your little cues. Ritual. Come up with some type of ritual, whether it's the time you have to write, or the word count that you want to write, or you just want to get done with a chapter at a time, or 3 paragraphs at a time. However you want to define it, have a ritual that is the minimum that you do. So you cue yourself, you sit down, you know you're going to do a minimal of this, whatever this happens to be. And before long, that just happens subconsciously. You sit down and know you've got to write to that point. And you will find as you get into this, that as you write to that point, you may get there and go, I think I'll keep going. And your ritual sort of stretches into a little bit longer ritual or a more detailed ritual. But at least start off with something that you can comfortably do every day. And it becomes like brushing your teeth. You can't go to bed without having done your ritual. Then your reward. What's your reward for having done it? I'm sure you don't want to give yourself a cookie or a piece of cake every time you sit down and write something, or you'll gain 50 pounds. It could be as simple as you checking off your list every day on the calendar. You can X through that day and say you did it that day. Jerry Seinfeld has some great advice. He's a writer. Most good comedians are writers. They have to write their own material, and it's not just off-the-cuff type thing. They think long and hard about timing and the right wording to get their jokes correct. He says to be a better comic, one has to create better jokes, and to create better jokes, one has to write every single day. I think that's the same with all writers. Seinfeld has an entire year on one large piece of paper on the wall with all of the days and months and weeks on it. He said the point is to mark each day of writing with a big red X. Therefore, you hate to break that chain. You see those X's, it feels like you're accomplished. To skip one hurts. So that's a pretty good simple method. I think that's valid for all writers. My daily habit happens to be only 500 words. I produce novels. I'm just releasing my 6th one next week. And a lot of times I do freelance and I speak and I teach, but I try to make myself write 500 words in a draft every day. If I'm not writing the 500 words, then I'm editing a chapter. So it's a ritual where I think I have to contribute to my work in progress every day, or I feel like I am not complete in my day's duties. I promise you will have to break other habits in order to create this one. Nobody is going to say, oh, I have extra time in my day to start writing. Everyone thinks their day is full with duties, tasks, obligations, habits, entertainment. But you're going to have to find something to cut out of that day to put writing into it. So just know that. It may be difficult to do. I know a lot of writers who say, I have the drive, I have the momentum, I just don't have the time. Then they don't have the drive and the momentum. You just need to find what that piece of your day is going to be and what you can do without to make room for your writing. I got a little idea. A cue could be a timer. So when everybody's got a smartphone, you can put a little alarm on there, and when that alarm goes off or your reminder goes off, it could be the trigger that says, I haven't written today. And hopefully you can do it right then, or you can 10 minutes later work it into your schedule, but do something to remind you, I haven't written today. And before long, you'll be just sitting down to write before the timer even goes off. Let's talk about focus a little bit. You're going to have a lot of ideas. Most writers do. And I think a lot of writers get stalled in the fact that they have so many ideas, they don't know which ones to write. Some writers will start with a story, think of another one, get some little trigger out there in the real world that prompts them to see another character or another story, and they go off on a tangent and they start writing that one. Focus on your work in progress. Follow it through. If you're writing a novel, that's going to be difficult because you're going to get a lot of catalysts and stimuli come at you during that time frame of months that it takes to write a novel. But there's nothing wrong with having a notebook, writing them down, close that notebook, and then go back to your work in progress. You want to see it through because until you know you can write a beginning, middle, and ending to a story, you don't know if you have a novel in you. So let's process one work at a time. Just mark those ideas and come back to them. When you're in your work in progress, let it rip. Actually, just let it go. Don't try to edit from the beginning. Don't try to polish that first chapter until it shines before you start with chapter 2. That is a major, major problem with new writers. They want that first chapter to be golden. And the problem is you may go back and change that first chapter because of what you did in chapter 5 or what you did in chapter 14. So you want to let it rip while you're writing to get the story down on paper. This is in your first novel. When somebody has written 3, 4, 5 novels and their mental process is a little more refined, then they can sit down and write a story and they know where they're going and they can edit a little bit more as they go. A lot of superb authors can actually sit down and write a novel, and by the time they get to the end, it's just about in final draft. So that's great once you've got those novels under your belt, but when you're writing your first one, just let it rip. We want to see if you can get ideas down on paper and that you have a complete story in your hands. You want to be able to define that middle and go to your next plot point, and carry it to a climax and carry it to an end. And if you're editing along the way, your mind can't process all of those duties at one time, and therefore your creativity stalls a little bit. So let's just kind of keep the faucet wide open and get the story down. This is actually how you fall in love with your writing. You're writing that story that's in your mind. And the faster you can write it down, the more exciting it gets. Because we write with a little bit of a movie in our head. And we need to get that down. So when you are not blocked with, is this the right verb? Oh my goodness, that's an adverb. Should I use it or not? Oh, that paragraph looks too long. Should I use this character? Instead of getting bogged down in all those details, just write a fun story. Okay, now I'm going to switch to personal development. I have taught writers who came to me and said, I've been writing for 20 years. And that's great. That shows a passion. However, when I sit down and talk to them and look at their work, I realize they've written the same for 20 years. They've written with the same bad habits for 20 years, and that is all they know. They did not take into account personal development. No writer arrives. Every single writer out there, Grisham, King, Picault, you just name them, on and on and on, they are continually fighting to improve their writing. For 2 reasons. They don't want to go stale. And we know somebody who has written 20 and 30 novels, the reader starts looking for that book that goes stale. And readers look for a reason to read an author, but they also look for a reason not to read an author because there's so many of them out there. There's so many great works out there. So personal development needs to be key for any author of any level. Now that means you need to be looking to, at the beginning, improve your big picture writing. That's your development processes. How can you make a story have that beginning, middle, and end? Have those plots that fall right in line, to have those twists and those turns and have a climax that's very satisfying to the reader. So what you've got to do is look at the big picture, take some classes, read some how-tos. My biggest suggestion is to read works that you love by authors that are good in your genre. So you put all that together and you're trying to learn how to be a good writer. As you progress, then you'll find yourself taking a class maybe on dialogue or secondary characters or how to write suspense in your romance. You get into more intricate details as you progress. But the key is that you always progress. So keep personal development in mind when you are scheduling time for your career as a writer. That can be classes. By all means, go to one conference a year, if for no other reason than to be around people just like you. From there, you can get the best feeling of, I don't know, it's an urgent need to get back and use what you've learned and take those feelings and emotions that you obtain by osmosis from being in a room full of people just like you, and take it home and put it on paper. And that's what you get from a conference, not just the teaching, not just the reviews or critiques that may be available to you, not just meeting an agent, but it means going home with a new energy, with new ideas that you've learned. And I think nothing beats that. You can find one-day workshops, you can find online workshops, you can find videos, you can find podcasts. Subscribe to blogs, subscribe to podcasts, subscribe to these people that give you how-tos on a regular basis. You'll find the ones that you really like. Find a critique group. Please find a critique group. We all need feedback as we go. And we don't need to get into a habit of we know what we want and nobody can tell us how to do different. People can always tell you how to do different. It doesn't mean you have to listen to every piece of advice, but you will glean some fantastic advice that you never saw. And a critique group is going to open your eyes to slants and angles to your work that you never imagined. Even the worst writer in a critique group could be a marvelous editor. You cannot judge a writer as an editor or an editor as a writer, because it takes two different parts of the brain and two different bits of talent, I guess, if you want. And I have been to critique groups where I would kill for somebody's feedback, where I wouldn't necessarily buy their book because they're not the best writer, but they have an eye. They're avid readers and they have an eye for what works and what doesn't. So don't discount someone's feedback because of who they are as a writer. They just might have this exquisite touch that you need to make your work better. Join at least one writing organization that will help you in your career. If you're a romance writer, there's Romance Writers of America. Mystery writer, like I am, it's Mystery Writers of America, as well as Sisters in Crime. Find one or two and belong to them. Under my marketing session that I do, I talk about why that can actually enable you as a writer in finding opportunities. But do join one, if nothing else for the camaraderie, so that you can cry on each other's shoulder and know what works and what doesn't and what obstacles to avoid. Of course, read a lot of books. Please keep a book in progress, reading as well as writing. When I am writing a mystery and I'm deep into one, I don't stop reading. As a matter of fact, I read harder. I will read my favorite authors at that time. I don't want to bring in new authors because I have my go-to ones that I study for plot or for characterization or for setting. And I want their words in my head as I'm writing. And I promise you, it works. I have a library of books, and if I get stuck, I grab one off the shelf, flip through, read a page, the water's flowing again. Now, I'm going to put a caveat in here. Do not get so wrapped up in your personal development that you don't write. There are a lot of writers out there who think they have to absorb one more how-to book, go to one more conference, submit one more chapter to their critique group before they do anything really progressive. Let me back up on the critique group. I've had people come in with outlines in critique groups before they'll ever write. But do not get so wound up in the how to learn that you just outline, that you just read books, that you just go to conventions. I know writers that go from conference to conference to convention because they want to be around all that excitement. It's thrilling. I promise you it's thrilling. And then you come home and it ebbs a little bit because you've got to actually sit down and put it into use. Instead, you'll have some writers that will go, what's the next conference I can go to get that fix? You need to learn that those things are just a lesson. Sooner or later, you have to put it into practice. And don't get so caught up that you just practice, and never do. After you have considered all of this that I have told you, then ponder whether or not you want to be a professional writer. I think sometimes we get the cart before the horse, and we think it would be great if I were home and I were writing full-time. What a fantastic career. I promise you, as a full-time writer, it's not all fantastic. Every job has its downsides. You will be an administrator part of the time. You will be rejected a lot of times. There will be months you have income. There will be months that it's a little thin. And there will be days you do not feel like writing, that you have to still sit down and write. So keep in mind, to be a professional writer, you've got to take the good and the bad together. There is not a career out there that doesn't come with its downsides. A professional writer is one who knows their craft and then can take their habit and their knowledge and point it in a marketable direction. What that's saying is that half your time is going to be spent trying to sell and market your work and yourself. Stop and think about whether or not you're interested in investing that type of time into your writing that you like so much. Know your strengths and shortcomings. That sounds easier. How can I say? That sounds simpler than what it is. When you become a writer, it doesn't take long before you realize what you struggle at and what comes easy. We think that writing is writing, and it's not. There will be writers who are very good at plotting and horrible at characterization. There will be some that are great at the storytelling, but they can't get the dialogue right. There will be some that can build up a great crescendo to a story, and the ending is horrid. So know your strengths and weaknesses and work on them. When somebody says your shortfall is this, listen to them. Don't take issue, but listen to them, because they're trying to help you. Be open to where the shortfalls are, because when we're writing and our nose is down into our work and our minds are bogged into our story, we don't necessarily see the details, and we don't see the pluses and the minuses. We're just trying to tell a good story, but you might be telling it wrong, and you might be using the wrong character, the wrong voice, the wrong verb tenses. It could be just as minute as that. In my first series, the Carolina Slade series, I wrote it in third person. I knew a professional author. She offered her agent to me. I didn't have it more laid out. I couldn't have it possibly more laid out than that. Opportunity was right there at my fingertips. I turned in the manuscript. It was declined. I was told thank you, but no thanks. I went home crushed, decided to become a freelance writer and put off novel writing, just thinking it wasn't for me. And I went back about 4 years later after a good novelist friend of mine said, you need to pull that back out and look at it again. It's been 4 years. You may be able to see the flaws in it. I pulled it out. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. In those 4 years, I had written so much freelancing and writing short stories and writing other things that my writing had matured. And when I saw that novel, I realized how bad it was. So I trashed it. A lot of writers right now would go, oh my goodness, you threw away a book. Yes, I threw away a book. I kept an outline because I didn't want to write another bad book. So I threw away all that temptation to cut and paste. And I wrote it again. And that time I took it before a critique group. I realized I needed help. The critique group was great. They helped me beat it up. But when we got to the end, they said it's still mediocre. Yes, that hurt. But I wanted it to be marketable. I threw it away again. if I had all of you people out there in front of me right now, there'd be a collective gasp that I threw away 100,000 words. But what I did in all of that process is learn what does work. I literally, it's like in a movie scene, woke up in the middle of the night and went, first person, first person. I write smoothly and easily in first person when I write essays and editorials, which is what I'd been doing for 4 years as a professional freelancer. I turned around and instead of the third person that book was written in, I changed it to first, and it flowed. It was what I needed to do. But it took going through the critique groups and going through making mistakes and going through rejection and being open-minded enough to be hunting for my shortfalls. Where were my shortfalls? And it was the voice that I was writing in. I was writing in the wrong voice. So when you're reading your own story, you get so deep into it you may not be able to see it. So go out, openly solicit what your shortcomings are and embrace them. It doesn't mean you have to embrace every single one. It doesn't mean that you need to let people beat you up to the point you don't want to sit down at the computer again. But listen to them, make a note. You can go through and go, oh, I see that one. Oh, no, I'm not doing that one. And that's a little bit of a maturity that you gain as a writer. When you mature, it's not just in how well you write, it's how well you critique and edit, and it's how well you accept feedback. That is huge, because the world will be happy to give you feedback on your writing. I promise you. Publish a book on Amazon and look at the reviews. Somebody's going to give you a 1 star. I hold my breath until I get a 1 star, because then I figured the bubbles popped, I'm good. I've got my 1 star out there. Listen to it all, but in a mature way, go through and check what you will and won't do. And before long, they'll come a lot easier than you think. Get a tough skin. I can't tell you that enough. I don't think there's a business out there that's going to beat you up any harder than being a writer. Everyone thinks they can write. Everyone thinks they should be published. So when you actually accomplish it, somebody's going to tell you where you got it wrong. Just take it. Just actually take it. Do not let it push you back. Take it, learn from it, and rock on. Just understand that. It will also make you think twice when you critique somebody else. Read voraciously. I mentioned that before. You don't have to read everything and everybody. I promise. There are some teachers that will say, read outside your genre and read some of everything. I'm not a member of that school. I believe that if you are going to write mystery, as I do, you need to know mystery. You need to read the people who are good at writing mystery. You only have so many hours in a day. You're already scrambling to put those hours together to write your work. So when you're reading, why not read something that's going to help you in your mission to write? I don't see you reading young adult suspense if you're going to be writing adult romance. It's just don't waste your time. It might be superb writing, but it's not going to help you write. Also, be willing to put a book down if it's not good. There is nothing criminal about not completing a book. So if you pick one up and you read it, I give one 50 pages. If I've read 50 pages and it's still not clicking with me, I'm going to put it down and go to something that will, because whatever I read is going up here, and when I write, it's going to come back out on the page. I would rather read something that I marvel at, that I am in awe of, because that will help me be a more awesome writer. So don't waste your time with books that don't resonate with you, regardless of how many reviews they have and regardless of how many people are reading them. Be willing to mark up your books. I know we taught that in school. You don't write in your books. Your teachers said, don't mark on the pages, right? So don't dog-ear the pages. Librarians cringe at that. However, when you buy a book and you love that author and you're trying to read that book in order to help you as a writer, mark it up. Mark it up. Use your highlighter. Use your pen. If you still can't can't make yourself put pen to paper, have a notebook next to your book. When I read, usually it's at night when I'm winding down after I have written, I will read and I have a notebook next to me, just in case I see a phrase that I think is phenomenal. Not that I want to take that phrase and insert it in my own work, but I want to dissect it. I want to see which verbs they used and, how did they describe that sunset? How did they describe that character with showing words instead of telling words and without using adverbs? I want to use that example and have it next to me when I go to write my work so I can do something similar or see if I can play with that and make it my own. There's so much education in a good book that you need to read it not just for entertainment, but for educational purposes as well. You will find, I promise you, over a while, you almost can't read a book for entertainment once you become a writer, because you will actually stop at the good parts, stop at the bad parts, and go, that's not the way I would have done that. But that's great. That helps you dissect through all those books out there and selectively find the ones that are good, because you are now reading with a writer's eye. Volume matters. When you get started writing, quantity matters. That means reading way more words than you write, writing way more words than you keep. In a 100,000 word book, I wouldn't be surprised that you don't write 500,000 words. That's the problem with a lot of self-published books, is that when somebody writes a 100,000 word book and they get to the end of the first draft, they think they're close to finished. In actuality, they should go back and remove some chapters, maybe remove a character, maybe insert a different character, redefine a scene, change the dialogue. Before you get done, you have written 5 to 10 times more than you have to publish. That's great, that's good, that's trial and error, and that's finding the exact words that fit. Superb writing that flows, that is so easy and fun to read, was written in that manner. Writing that is first draft or second draft is very easy to spot. I don't care who the writer is. So know that you're going to throw away a lot of words. I know it hurts, it's difficult, but know that you're going to toss them. It's called killing the babies, killing your darlings, however you want to put it. It sounds gross, but it hurts when you throw your words away. You've got this superb scene, you think this character is spot on, and then you go to a critique group and go, what does that have to do with the story? Or they go, that doesn't fit there, or I don't understand why that character's doing that. And it's going to hurt right here. And you're going to have to cut, put it somewhere else, take it out of your book. Promise, it will make your work better. Keep a notebook and a calendar. Jot down your daily task. This morning, it's a month. Let's see, today's Tuesday. Yesterday morning, I opened my notebook and there was a full page of my to-do list of what I have to do this week. Some of it is administrative, some of it is critique, some of it is editing, some of it is blog posts, some of it is chapters 13, 14, and 15 in my work in progress. But it tells you what you need to do. You need that. You need that direction. It's not just, I'll work on the next chapter, because it might be a week before you get to that next chapter because it's not that well defined. You need to have a calendar and have a notebook as to what your daily tasks are going to be, because you want to be able to check them off as you go down the list. That notebook can have anything. There are no rules to that notebook. It can be your task. But my notebooks also will have nice phrases that I happen to read someplace and I want to jot them down. It could be somebody that I saw online that I want to look up their book. It could be a new blog that I want to follow. It could be anything, but that is my writing notebook. That is my writing journey that I can go back to when I want ideas, or I promise you will think you can remember things, you won't remember them. You'll go, I remember that, you won't. Have a notebook handy at all times. I have one at my nightstand, I have one in my car, I have one at my computer. And it's so that I can jot down those pearls of wisdom, those resources, those phrases that I hear, so that I can have something to go back to later. Always have a notebook. Absorb great advice. Try to be around those that are successful. Writers are great mentors, and they're pretty big-hearted about it, I believe. I've mentored many a writer. I critique many a work that I don't get paid for, or I don't have to make appearance for, but somebody may send me one chapter and say, I think I'm lost in this chapter, would you just glance at it for me? I'm more than happy to do it. Because somebody down in my past reached out to me and helped me. I think writers need to always reach back and help those that are struggling and come up. We don't want bad books out there. We want as little bad material as possible. So as a writer who has been published, I want to reach back to those who are not, to help them so that they don't prematurely make a bad mistake. The writing itself, didn't think we'd ever get there, did you? Organize your ideas. I suggest you outline before you start your work. As time goes on and you mature as a writer and you become published, you may not have to outline. I'm a pure pantser right now. That means I write by the seat of my pants. When I write a novel, 100,000 word work in progress, I do not outline it. Part of that is because it's mystery and I like to discover the story as it plays out. But also, I know better as to what is needed at what point in a story. I know by the 25% mark where I need to be, at the 50% mark, at the 75% mark. It's just inherent in me now. But when you start off, you may not be comfortable with that. You'll find yourself getting wordy. You may find yourself getting too brief. Have an outline to go by. You need to plan your work when you start so that you know the path that you're taking. You will want your writing to be concise. However, you want a crappy, sloppy first draft. You want it to be long. You want it to be full of all kinds of junk because you're going to go through and cut out. It ought to be fun. Editing ought to become fun after a while because you know as you cut out, you're making it tighter and that makes it more crisp. And you know when you read a book, you love a plot that just pops and just keeps going. You love dialogue that is snappy and crisp. You like characters that just bounce off the page. That's tight writing. That's what you're trying to achieve. When you write your first draft, it's gonna drone. But you're just getting ideas down the page. It's the editing that puts the snap into it. So just know, you're allowed to do a crappy first draft because you're gonna make it sweet and concise when you go back through your edits. When you're writing, write with force. When you first start out as a new writer, you will write with telling words, you will write with passive voice, you will write loose. Over time, you're going to develop the tools of showing versus telling, and I'll cover that in another session. You will avoid the lightweight or the vague words, there, it, that, had. Of course, the was, were, be being been a passive voice. You're going to use more active verbs. You're going to use verbs you have to look up. You need a thesaurus open. I keep thesaurus.com open on my computer when I'm working. It is constantly open. I may write down a word that a verb that I want to use in a sentence. I'll read the sentence and go, it's not quite popping. I will throw that verb into thesaurus.com to see just what else there is out there. It's amazing what you can do with just changing one verb in a sentence. So I want you to write with force. Get imaginative with your words. Try to use words that challenge you, that stretch you out, instead of using everyday words that you use in dialogue. Write for the reader as well as yourself. I'm a little leery into how far I need to tell you to take that. You do know you're writing for a reader. And we all have that dream of we want people reading our work going, that was awesome. We all love that. But you've got to write for yourself first. I think when you edit is when you turn around and write for your reader. So keep that in mind. Write for yourself, get that story sloppy down on the page. When you come back and edit, remember you're also writing for the reader. And that's where you're going to make it a little snappier, a little more keen, and hone those words down to where they shine. And that's where I jump into edit like a crazy person. I mean, edit, edit, edit. That does not mean go through the first draft one time and go, that's good. You don't want good. You want great. You want to read a scene and just be in love with yourself. I am serious. It needs to be that good. If you read something and go, okay, well, that's good. No, do it again. Edit it again. You want to edit it so that you are so proud of what you got on that page. You want to edit such that you see it in movie form. You want to edit it so that it's just beautiful. I don't know how to say it any more than that. Read it aloud. Read it aloud. And, you've edited and edited. Read it aloud now and see if it sounds just as great when you're telling it to someone else. When I read each of my chapters aloud to someone else when I edit. When I finish a book, I read the entire manuscript aloud, all 100,000 words. It is difficult. It takes a little bit of time. However, I find more problems, more issues, and I can tighten it so much better when I read it aloud. When I read a sentence and go, okay, I don't even feel like inflection in my voice. I want to read something so that I want to storytell it. I want to put emotion into it. If I read a sentence and it's just putting facts down on a page, then I know something's wrong. I have to change verbs, remove adverbs, find better nouns. So you want to edit to the nth degree. I promise you will not over edit. I promise you won't over edit. Know the rules of grammar and creative writing. I don't care how creative your work is. If you can't get your verb tenses right, or your commas right, or you put semicolons when they're not needed, if you do a lot of that, that's going to turn off not just agents and publishers, but book reviewers. They will not want to review your book. It will put off the sophisticated reader. It will put off actually the unsophisticated reader, only they won't know why. So your grammar and your punctuation and your basics of good creative writing need to be in your head. Another reason you need to do some of that personal development so that you understand them. I receive emails from a lot of people who say, I have a great story, but I don't know grammar. My first suggestion to them is, well, learn your grammar. Don't wait for an editor to fix it for you. Grammar can alter the meaning of your story. It can totally change the meaning of a sentence, the intention of a character. It can alter the climax. It can alter plot points. You need to know your grammar rules, as well as some of your basic creative writing rules, like the author talking versus the character. It's so easy to slip into that as a new writer. You want the character to be doing all the talking, not the author filling in between the dialogue. Manuals of style are out there for all types of writing. For creative writing, the proper one is the Chicago Manual of Style. Get you a little hand pocket version of it. If you aren't sure how to use commas, flip to the right page in commas. It's a very easy little book to keep readily available. Not to mention they have a free website that's pretty good as well. So we talked a lot about writing, about being a new writer, about how to edit. Let's talk about attitude. The last thing I want to leave you with is attitude. Believe you can be good enough. It does not mean tomorrow. It may not be next Sunday, but you can be good enough if you put the time into it. Many people are talented and give up along the way because they feel they aren't talented enough. That's what you want to avoid. There will be enough naysayers in the world without you adding to that pile. So the magic comes in what you do with the talent you have. Diligence always wins the day. Be an incessant observer. Live with a writer's eye. I am forever writing down notes if I'm around a group of people. It's to the point that people that know me well know that when I go silent, I'm composing something in my head based on something they said. I've had people say, don't you write that down? where they know that's exactly what I'm doing, is thinking of a scene centered around whatever just happened. I've got several of those in my books, and that's what we want to read, is reality. And there is nothing better than some of the crazy things we run into day by day. Even in your dullest day, listen to dialogue. Just listen close to the dialogue, and you'll have somebody throw out a crazy metaphor you never thought of, and you want to go home and write that down. So listen and watch with a writer's eye and ear. Of course, you've got your notebook at the ready to jot all this down. So keep that in mind. At least you've got a smartphone that you can take notes on. Okay. Be willing to experience life. You cannot be a writer just at your desk 24/7. You've got to get out there and live a little bit, be around people a little bit. My second series is set on Edisto Beach. I'm headed to Edisto Beach in 2 more weeks. I'm in the middle of a 4th novel in that series. I need some details. I could look it up online. I have friends that live at Edisto Beach. I know half the people at Edisto Beach. I could pick the phone up and call them. I could have them take pictures, or I can drive down there and walk amongst the cemetery at the Presbyterian Church, or I can walk along the marsh to see exactly how a body would hang up in the reeds. I could walk along the surf when my character's melancholy about something, just to get the feel of the sounds and the smells and all the senses. You want to try and live life and absorb it so that you can put it into your book. Okay? You can't just do it on Google Earth, I promise. Write what you love rather than what is selling. Because what is hot and selling now won't be a year from now, and it's going to take you that long to get your book written, edited, and published. So do not look at trends. That's how so many people wrote so many bad vampire books. Vampires were the thing. Everybody decided they were going to write them. By the time their book came out, vampires were passé. So write what you love rather than what is selling. Do not be a trend chaser. Write through your fears. You may or may not have family that supports you. I hope you do have family that supports you. Mine supports me. I know that's worth gold. But just in case you don't, or you have people that don't understand your writing, and I promise sooner or later somebody's going to say something irritating to you as if they could do just what you're doing. Write through it. Write through the naysaying, write through the critiques, write through the rejections. Just keep writing through it. It's part of what we do, and part of being by yourself is going to escalate those fears because you have nobody telling you it's okay. You're deep in your own head, so you tend to think negative when you get 6 rejections in a row. So just know that you will have those fears. There's not a writer out there that doesn't have self-doubt. Last week I was worried sick about my book release coming out. I was sending out copies to reviewers. That's always a tense moment because after a few books you wonder if you still have it in you. So my 6th book is coming out. I've been nervous as a cat. And I'm already getting feedback that, oh, this is your best one. This is your best one. My husband goes, you do this every time. I don't know why you do this to yourself. It's what we do. It's what we do. So just know that every other writer out there has those fears. Just keep writing through them. Also know there is no such thing as writer's block. I do not condone it. I don't believe in it. Writer's block just means you're having a bad day. There isn't a thing in life, there isn't a career in life that you could undertake that you're not going to have a bad day. There are going to be days you don't want to go to work. Same thing happens in writing. You don't want to show up. You don't feel like you can write that day. Well, guess what? You need to show up and write through that. Because by the time you get to the end of that book, there will be the days you had to slog through it. There'll be the days that it just flowed. You get to that book at the end, nobody will be able to tell the difference. You write. It's just that simple. Some days the words come slower, some days they come faster. But they're your words coming out of your brain. It's all your talent. It's all good. It's not all supposed to be slick and clean and easy. It needs to be hard in order to be good. Love to write. When you lose the love to write, it's time to quit. Whether you publish or not, that's the last thing. A lot of writers get into this wanting to publish. You may not be able to publish, or you may find that you get rejected to the point you can't traditionally publish, so you decide to self-publish. You self-publish, you can't sell some books because it's difficult as a self-published author to sell books, and I will cover that in another session. But if you feel you want to quit because you can't publish, then by all means quit. Because a writer writes because they can't not write. It's that simple. So write your stories. Just write your stories. Don't think about publishing when you're writing your stories. Think about having fun. Think about spinning that tale. Just put yourself in the story, in the characters, loving the right verbs, loving those sentences that are just awesome. That's what you want out of this, because that's the motivation that's going to keep you going. Publishing is a flash in the pan. You can publish a book today, 6 weeks from now, you're nobody, and nobody's buying your book. It's a quick fix. So you've got to be in love with writing and the journey to get there, not the publishing, in order for you to endure the long haul of this profession. I've mentioned love to edit. Each time ought to make you more excited. Every time you open that manuscript, each time you ought to be excited about trying to make this better. I call it adding layers to an onion instead of peeling it off. It's like I have this basic core of an onion, and then the first draft, I add another layer. The next round of edits, I do another layer. The next round, another layer. I'll do it until I think that thing is just perfect. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to be so in love with editing your work that you're almost leery of cutting it loose. Almost. But let a critique group help you reach the point where you think it's ready to go out into the world. Set your standards high. Do not settle. The self-publishing industry is making billions right now on the backs of people who have settled. I hate to say that because I'm all for the self-publishing industry. I'm getting ready to self-publish some books in 2017. However, a lot of people will self-publish because they think they can't make it traditionally. I have news for you. Readers want to read a good book. They don't care how it was published. Therefore, your standards ought to equal that of a traditionally published book. Because you can't publish with St. Martin's or Random House or Simon & Schuster does not mean your book should not be just as good. So hold your standards high. If you want a readership and you want to make sales, a reader has to know that they're getting just as good a quality in your book as the one they get from a major publishing house. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is I want your passion for this craft to rule the day. I want you to wake up wanting to write. I want you to go to sleep thinking plot points in your head, running characters through your mind. I want you to be sitting in a room with other people going, how can I work this in chapter 14? I want you to be thinking as a writer and that passion ruling you. That makes for a successful writer. That person is trying to take everything in their life and infuse it into a good story. But that makes a great, successful writer. And I think if you can tap into that and make writing exciting, regardless of all the hurdles you've got to go through to publish, then I think you'll have a good grip on it. And that's the key. The habits of a successful writer begins with passion. Thank you very much.